and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. As always, I am delighted to be with you as we have another conversation, as I have another conversation with an author, as you join me for that conversation. As we get started, I do want to remind you, as I always do, to please like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you're either listening to or watching this episode on. Really does help to get the podcast out to more readers such as yourselves. If you want to help the podcast in another way, you can do so by going to gsmcpodcast.net and leaving us a tip. This not only helps the podcast, but the network as a whole. Whatever support you give this podcast, and that has been substantial throughout the years. This is the 8th year of this podcast, which I think it's more than that. I think I always say 8, and I think it's actually 10. You know what? I'm going to look that up, but it's been longer than I thought it was, and you have been with me. A lot of you have been with me from the beginning. So whatever form that support has taken is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. Whether that's following on social media, sharing the message, or sharing the episodes, whatever it is, thank you as always. Again, that link is the video that's frozen next to me is gsmcpodcast.net. Thank you so much for your support. How is your week going? The East Coast just got more snow. Looks very pretty when I see it on videos on social media. I know it's not fun to live in, though. Having lived in snow, I know that it's pretty for about 5 minutes as it's falling and looking lovely, and then you have to deal with it and live in it. And so I hope you're staying warm. I hope you're staying safe. And hopefully this will be short-lived, but it looks beautiful from a different continent where I went on a walk and the buds are coming out on the trees. The trees are blossoming. I see flowers. Our field is just where I take the dogs for their walk. The field is just blanketed in beautiful yellow flowers. From here, the snow also looks lovely, but I can understand that you are probably ready for spring. We are almost to March, so my sympathies to you. But maybe you love winter and you are enjoying this winter storm and getting out and playing in the snow. Whatever it is, I either send you yays or sympathies, however you're feeling. But maybe it's giving you extra time to read. Also, I don't know. My week is going well so far, doing lessons. I have the most joyful child that I teach, and I saw her yesterday and today, and she has so much energy. She pays attention, so I let her be as busy as possible, but she likes to have momentary dance parties in the middle of lessons, and if I ask her a relevant question, she'll answer it while dancing. So she gets to be as busy as possible because she still pays attention. But she is like a little dose of serotonin in my days. Oh my gosh, she is just joy personified. I love seeing her. So that is a happy part of my week. And our weekend was, I baked a lot of bread this past weekend. I baked 3 loaves of sourdough, which is great. I was running low in the freezer, so I like to have some in the freezer, and then I have some fresh, and I don't know, that's just my hobby of late, is baking sourdough when I'm not doing other things, and taking care of dogs who are waking me up way too much in the middle of the night, but what can you do? At any rate, you're not here to talk about my dogs or my sourdough bread. We are here to talk about books, and I have author Bill Hillmann joining me to talk about his novel, White Flight. This is a companion to his earlier book, The Old Neighborhood. Let me give you the description of this. Chicago's western suburbs. Young Joe Walsh is making a go of it at a new school, still haunted by his rough and tumble city upbringing. He's got some great opportunities. A summer seminar at one of the world's top physics laboratories, a hard-hitting Catholic clergyman and boxing instructor who thinks he's got talent in the ring, and a beautiful girlfriend who's giving him some much-needed love and support. But the challenges of Chicago have followed him to its outskirts. His sister's struggling to recover after being shot by one of his former friends. His mom's unvarnished ways are rubbing their wealthy neighbors the wrong way, and his brother's fresh out of prison and falling into old habits. Like many young men before him, Joe's taking out his frustrations in the boxing ring and dreaming of a triumphant career. but will that too become a prison? This follow up to Bill Hillmann's The Old Neighborhood connects like a 1-2 punch. It's another modern classic from one of the city's best authors, a powerful story unlike anything you've read before. So that is the description of this novel. As you heard, it is a companion to The Old Neighborhood. And Bill talks about that a little bit in the interview, why it's called a companion and not a sequel, but same family, same characters, continuing that story from The Old Neighborhood. And you heard the story of, or part of the story of Joe, who is the main character. And Joe makes some choices. Joe has some things counting against him. Both of those, there are things counting against him. There are certain circumstances that are not helping in his life. But Joe also makes some choices. And this book goes in a lot of directions that maybe you're expecting, maybe you're not. But it is certainly the story of a young man who is struggling in many ways. The move to a new neighborhood, no matter where you go, there you are, does not help. While some of the things that his mom does or says or how she acts in the new neighborhood are, kind of funny in some ways, they are not helpful and they don't necessarily help Joe adjust or fit in or the rest of the family. They are, as a family, they're struggling, and Joe as a character is definitely struggling. So we are watching him, and he has so much potential in so many ways. He has potential as a really bright young student. He has potential as a boxer, and he's got, as you heard, the Catholic clergyman and boxing instructor. He goes to a Catholic school, and he is being helped by a boxing coach who is helping him to hone that skill and become really good. So he has a lot of potential. And then life happens, decisions are made, choices take you in directions you might not expect, and that is the story where we find Joe. So let's go ahead and let Bill tell more of that story. Again, the book is called White Flight. The author is Bill Hillmann. Hi, Bill. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I'm excited to talk about your book, White Flight. Before we do that, though, if you would take just a moment to introduce yourself so that my readers can get to know you a little bit.
Hey, I'm Bill Hillmann. I'm a writer and professor. I write fiction and nonfiction, and this is my fourth book.
Okay. Yes, and this is it doesn't say sequel, it says companion to The Old Neighborhood. So what's the distinction for you there?
I mean, it's a standalone book. You can read it alone. You don't need to read The Old Neighborhood. But it comes out of the same world, same characters. But yeah, you can read it alone if you want. You can read them out of order if you want. But they're connected by
Okay.
the family, and the main character is the same.
Okay. All right. So can you give an overview of White Flight?
So it's basically it follows a family that moves from the city to the suburbs. They're kind of like driven out of the city by the violence and the crime that they're also participating in, right? So it's not really like you know, it's partly their own fault, really.
Mm.
The crime, because the oldest brother is kind of this infamous criminal who's like a gang leader, armed robber, and was in prison at the time they move. So they go out there. It's also a mixed race family, so it's not really like a white family fully. It's like there's two
Hmm.
adopted sisters from the Dominican Republic. So it's kind of like it kind of is white flight, but it isn't.
Hmm.
And it's definitely failed white flight because when they get out there, they realize right away that they don't belong. They're very different from their neighbors, right? Their neighbors are lawyers and doctors, and they're construction. My parents were the parents in the book are a construction worker and a babysitter, and who does like way too much babysitting. Like she has too many babysitting clients for her license, and she ends
Hmm.
up getting in big trouble over it. And so it's just a bunch of massive like culture clashes of like city people versus suburban people. And it's kind of like the story of like how sure you can be white, but are you white enough? Are you like
Hmm.
white, or are you
Right.
like working class city white?
Yeah.
It's so it kind of like they kind of get run out of that neighborhood of Lagrange where they first go to. A lot of it's spurred on by like when the brother gets out of prison. The brother
Mm-hmm.
gets out of prison, and he is very clearly someone who just got out of prison. Like he looks like it and he acts like it, and so the you know the wealthy people around them are like, oh my God, this is not okay, and so it kind of devolves from there.
Yeah. And flight can suggest both escape as well as avoidance. So I think it's both for this family, a combination thereof. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean the white flight is like so it all plays into this metaphor that like is kind of woven through both books about that the main character when he's a little boy he's fishing in the Star Dock in Montrose Harbor on the north side of Chicago, and the lure obviously looks like a fish. It's meant to fool fish, but it can also fool birds, and so a seagull thinks it's a real fish and swoops down on it and tries to eat it. Obviously gets hooked,
Mm-hmm.
gets captured right by the hooks, and the grandfather has to come in and sort of cut it loose, and then it flies away. So that metaphor kind of is a central kind of repeated image in dreams and in memories for the main character, and it's really about kind of like compassion and like circumstance can kind of put you into a really like life will kind of get you into bad situations that are kind of unescapable, but you've got to find a way to kind of cut yourself free and escape.
Mm-hmm.
And so the main character later in the book, he goes to like a fancy college in the area, and again another more culture clashes happening, and he ends up getting into a big fight and ends up in trouble with the law, and he goes on the run with his girlfriend. They head to New Orleans to try to escape capture, and it devolves from there.
Yeah. So you heard Bill say it devolves from there. And I said in my introduction that, things happen, choices are made, other things happen that might feel out of control and sometimes are out of control. But there were a lot of ways this twists, not twists and turns, but turns that this book took that I wasn't always necessarily expecting. I had a lot of hope for Joe, and those hopes weren't always realized, but you follow Joe on this path that he is on, and you are just kind of along for the ride. There, of course, with every character, there isn't anything that you can do to change what happens to the character, but you may have hopes for this character that might not happen in the book, or it may go as you expect, but we are with Joe on this journey and everywhere that this journey takes him. But we are going to take our first break of this episode. When we come back, Bill will talk more about the inspiration for this book and this continuation of the family story and Joe's story. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to work, cause my boss is a jerk, and I'm not even that paid. I need a change in my life, cause I don't feel alive, and there's nothing that makes me happy. Hold my beer for a minute, I'm about to quit my job, cash in for a ticket. I'm going on a trip and I don't plan to visit. I'm gonna stay there till I feel like I'm winning, and this is just the beginning. I need a big change, help me feel like living. I need a big swing, home runs I'm hitting, and I'll never look back, moving on till I get it all. And we all got dreams, we all want things, but what you gonna do for it? How you gonna move for it? What you gonna be? And do you believe you can do anything?
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Bill Hillmann. Before the break, Bill was giving an overview of the story. As we get into this second segment and more of the conversation with Bill, I do want to give you your second and final reminder that if you want to support the podcast in a monetary fashion, you can do so by going to gsmcpodcast.net. There you can leave us a tip that will help not only this podcast, but the network as a whole. All of that support, as I already said and will continue to say, is greatly appreciated. So thank you for past, present, and future support. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. As I said before the break, Bill gave an overview of this story. So let's go ahead and continue with the conversation with Bill. What was your initial inspiration for this part of the story?
Yeah, so it's all based on my life. It's all based on my life. I got in some trouble when I was in college. I got into a fight that's very similar to the one that the main character gets into. And I got in a lot of trouble with it. And it could have gone worse than it did. And luckily, it didn't go as bad as it could have with the injuries for the other person. But it was a weird situation. Like I was totally getting my girlfriend was, at the time was getting bullied. I stood up for her. These guys all of a sudden they wanted to fight. There was a bunch of guys trying to fight, trying to attack me. One kicked me in the head. I ended up kicking one of them in the head, and then it didn't go well for them, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And but the suburban sort of the nature of the suburbanness of the place and the people that were bullying me and trying to attack me and stuff, it collided with my like blue collar tough upbringing and my boxing and all that. So it was like a collision of like kind of this like kind of bullying stupidness of like kind of like frat boyish, college life with like a guy that, is a blue collar guy that's been through a lot and is going to defend himself at all costs. And so that collision of class really is what inspired the novel, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you got like the typical white bully thing, like frat boy bully, and then you got this guy that's like a construction worker, like blue collar, like boxing champion, like, and he's just trying to live his life, but the bullying they bit off more than they could chew. They looked at me and didn't see a dangerous person, but then when they investigated, they found out that like I could really fight. Like it's not like I'm gonna push and getting you in a headlock or something. It's gonna be like really dangerous fight. And if I feel like trapped and attacked by multiple people, it's gonna get really crazy. So there's like that collision, that class collision that I wanted to kind of like investigate and express. It's like, my parents, they started a family at a very young age, so they didn't go to. My mom didn't graduate grammar school. My dad dropped out freshman year of high school, so I was just coming from a different place, like a different psyche,
Mm-hmm.
a different American psyche, and so I wanted to explore that in fiction. So I made it more dramatic, right?
Right.
Obviously, like it gets over the top crazy. These things didn't happen, but
Yeah.
they're inspired by a real conflict in my life that definitely, occurred.
Okay. Yeah. So you mentioned boxing a couple of times, and boxing is a metaphor throughout the story. I mean, it's actual because the main character Joe is a boxer, but it's also a metaphor, I think, for a lot more. Can you talk about boxing as metaphor?
Yeah, I mean, I think boxing, it goes back, all the way to like these ancient images, like the pugilist at rest. These ancient sort of old images that are rooted in like the original kind of martial art. Man alone, man, having to survive, man, having to conquer their enemies, right? But I think the irony of it all, right, in boxing is that you're really fighting against yourself to like perfect yourself, and like once you perfect yourself, then you're undefeatable, and that's kind of what always sort of plays out in boxing, and once you come to realize that, like you stop seeing your opponents as enemies or as your bad guys in your life, like the guy that you have to get. You want to hate him, you want to do this thing. You actually, when you realize that that it's really you against you, then you realize that they're actually your can be your dearest friends, and that
Mm.
kind of starts to play out with Joe and his big rival, a kid that's based on a real guy from Detroit, named Aaron Williams, who was a phenom, 17-year-old who just was knocking out all these like elite fighters and doing incredible things. And I didn't fight him, but my friend fought him a couple times, and so I kind of used him as like this. He was a really unique kid. He was a black kid from Detroit. But he was kind of like a geek.
Mm.
He was kind of like a nerd and a geek, and like so it was this bizarre thing because he was like a Mike Tyson like destroyer, but he was this geeky kid, and so I thought he was a really unique character to kind of like base my like rival on, the rival of the main character on, because I think we don't give enough like I feel like that we don't give enough. A lot of times in literature, you don't see a lot of depth in African American characters, and a lot of like uniqueness and quirkiness. And I've had like, through boxing and through just my life in general, I've had like a lot of close friendships with African American guys, and they're really super different from each other. It's not like a like we like people like to kind of caricature them,
Hmm.
but what I found is that they're actually very unique and very nuanced and very like they'll say things that you just never would have expected to hear. Like when you think of the black community or something, you never expected to hear that from a black guy, but actually a lot of times they say really surprising off the wall stuff and have really unique ways of looking at the world.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to kind of I feel like it's the duty of a writer to kind of explore that. And so he was one of my favorite characters to kind of play with, because it's this kid that kind of orphaned kid who's his grandpa was a and he gets obsessed with, like, he's like really obsessed with the Mario Brothers, and he nicknamed himself Luigi, and like these, like, I think anytime you take an opposite on in your writing, whether it's a woman, or if you're a man and it's a woman, or whatever, but maybe racially or whatever, age, I think you gotta really like really give them the dignity and the uniqueness that can bring to life someone, so that can be unforgettable on a
Hmm.
page,
Yeah.
and that's so, and then he's terrified of him. He's having nightmares about him, and then he realizes that he's been his friend all along, like, and that, like, they kind of start to like team up in this weird way, and they kind of you know they bond through these competitions they've had, and him and Joe kind of is conquering this fear of him and this like terror of him, and there's real damage occurring. Like the guy's like hurting him, his brain, like causing brain damage and stuff. But like he finds his way through it, through like the coaching of his guy. Another guy, Sam Colonna, is another character that I based the trainer on, who's a real guy, who's a legendary, iconic trainer who trained a bunch of champions of professional, amateur, and I wanted to dig into, like, to be a great boxing trainer, you gotta have a deep sort of sense of humanity, and you have to have, like, you almost got to be a psychologist. You got to be like an
Mm.
amateur psychologist, and you got to have a really a deep understanding of human beings, and so I try to really like dig in and show, inspired by Sam Colonna, create this character, this trainer who really truly loves his fighters, and takes deep care with them, and finds ways to motivate them, and sort of challenge them to overcome their fears, and all that. So I mean, boxing, it's a very much a psychological sport, right? You really got to conquer yourself, and you need the right people around you to help you conquer yourself
Mm.
and grow into like your fullest potential. And it's no other sports like that. All the team sports, they're nothing like that. It's the individual sport, the nature of the individual sport. It's a deep and a profound thing where you really got to dig into your own psyche in order to conquer yourself.
Yeah. Okay. I've never really watched a lot of boxing. I know a little bit about boxing. My husband watches boxing, and I've learned a little bit more from talking about it with him and watching some of it with him. It's not a sport that I watch a lot or am familiar with to any great extent. Like many sports, I don't watch a lot of sports, as you probably know if you've listened to this podcast for a long time. But I was listening to what Bill was talking about, and how obviously it's different from a team sport. And yes, you have your opponent, but really it's a lot about knowing yourself, knowing your opponent, but also how you yourself react in those moments, and what are you going to do, how are you going to react. You have to react to your opponent, but it's also about individuality in some ways, and because you can only rely on yourself, you don't have that team to rely on. So boxing as a metaphor really does play throughout the book. Joe is a boxer, and there are scenes where he is depicted boxing, training boxing, teaching others to box, but that there's a lot of metaphor for boxing throughout this whole story. We're going to go ahead and take our second break of this podcast. When we come back, we'll be talking more about Joe as the main character and protagonist of the book. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Bill Hillmann. Before the break, we were talking about the importance of boxing and how that is a recurring theme throughout the book, throughout Joe's life, and boxing as metaphor. Let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Bill. More about Joe as the main character. He is complex. He's got different layers. But what about him do you think might resonate with readers?
Well, I mean, I think, it's Joe is somebody that has a good nature. He has a good heart. He tries to be moral. He grapples with himself. He grapples with different versions of himself. He spends a lot of time, sort of tortured by his mistakes, and striving to be a good person, and striving to be truthful, and to follow his heart. And he, life inevitably is gonna like bring these obstacles and these impossible situations, and you got to make these decisions, and there's no right answer, and each answer has massive consequence, and he's constantly sort of reaching for goodness, even in the darkest places. Even when incarcerated, he's still striving, even though the demons, he's just surrounded by people at their worst, in their worst moments of their life, in warfare, becoming depraved sexually, all these things, and he's sort of feeling himself being sucked into those like dark places, but he's always kind of fighting to do right and do good, and hold on to like his humanity in the midst of some of the darkest places on earth that he ends up in. Mm-hmm. And I think that I think any human being who reads that should connect with that, and see, right, the impossibility of his ability to survive and persevere and maintain his humanity in all these impossible moments that he has to experience.
Mm-hmm. The book, and no spoilers, but it's a little bit open-ended in a lot of ways. What do you hope readers will take away from the book?
Well, I mean, the main metaphor towards the end, as Joe, like, it's a little bit of like a journey through sort of like religious philosophy, and he kind of rejects Catholicism. Then he ends up kind of falling into this, voodoo sort of white magic, black magic realm, and then he finds like Buddhism, like bizarrely in jail through his girlfriend, and it's kind of, I wanted to play into like all this. When you're that age, when you're like in college age, a lot of times you're really like searching, questioning, and kind of finding new ways of thought. Like that's the whole point of college, and he does fail in college. Like he's obviously expelled, and he doesn't make it, but he I think that he's more interested, less interested in like getting a degree, and more interested in like understanding life, and that journey. As he's bouncing around, he's in these horrible positions, he finds Buddhism, and he finds this this sort of this metaphor of the lotus, and the Lotus Sutra, and he's trying to find like awaken a more enlightened self, even though he's in this horrific place, one of the darkest places in the United States, or in the world, maybe, Menard Prison in the early 2000s. And he's still striving and struggling, even in the midst of having to sort of, not having to, but sort of in the midst of this life and death situation, right? He finds his way through it, by luck and by chance, and by people just being generous to him. He's able to kind of escape and find this sort of this peace and this humanity in his escape from that place.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit more about his relationship with his girlfriend Lauren, and how she both, I think, reflects and contrasts with him?
Yeah. So Lauren is it's kind of based on an ex of mine, and but it's obviously like a very fictionalized person. And she's like this very creative singer, artist kind of person that young as well, and kind of running in all directions. And she's kind of like, it's kind of becomes like this like spiritual guide for him. Her sort of deep, her questionings and her journey, spiritual journey, is like way deeper and more intense than him, but it kind of like it draws him into it. um she just loves him, and she tries to help him, and she's there for him, and she she's just this unique, multiracial person, creative, really really brilliant creative. And yeah, she just kind of is always there, kind of nudging him towards deeper thought and deeper growth. And they're on like a really intense journey together, and a very intense time in their lives. And I think yeah, she just sort of embodies like this wild creative spirit of like early 20 something intellectual creative that is really really seeking out truth, and seeking out humanity in the midst of her sort of chaotic and troubled life.
Okay. Are you done with Joe's story, or do you want to write more?
So I've already written the third book.
Okay.
The third book is in like, it's getting into like the range where I could maybe finish it within maybe a year or so.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna turn, Joe's gonna go on and turn professional as a boxer. Things are gonna go good, and then they're gonna go really bad. Like they tend to, right? Um and yeah, so I'm really excited about that one. This one's gonna be more like a little darker, a little bit more like a psychological thriller.
Hmm.
It's gonna be more like a little bit. It's gonna get really dark, like off, like very very violent and graphic and horrific. Um, it's gonna kind of be like a CTE
Mm.
novel, where like you see someone sort of get lose their mind, lose touch with reality as their brain is being damaged, but they're
Mm.
also kind of like achieving their dreams at the same time. And it's like this, like the thing that he loves, that is his key to triumph and happiness and joy in his life, is the same thing that is simultaneously like destroying him to
Yeah.
the point of no return. And that's kind of the impossible nature of boxing. And you see it in MMA too, in
Yep.
football as well, right? You got like Junior Seau, an incredible, wonderful athlete, who had a wonderful heart, but the CTE was too much, and it just
Yep.
destroyed him, and
Yep.
he died in a horrific way. And I think that I kind of want to raise awareness for CTE. Um, I don't think I have CTE, but I think I may have some like very mild symptoms of it. And I
Hmm.
know a lot of people that have it because of boxing.
Right.
And luckily none of them have a few of them have had some pretty violent outbursts, but luckily most of them have been able to get like the help they need and get sedated. But the thing is that you know we sit here and we're entertained by these athletes that have these like high impact in these high impact sports where there's a lot of concussions. We're thrilled by these athletes. We judge them. We judge their character when they start to act up. Well, the problem is that we're not taking into consideration that maybe they're acting up because their brain is coming apart.
Yep.
And I think I hope that this third book will be kind of a window into the psychological decay of CTE, and give a little more dignity, urge people to give more dignity and compassion to people who play these high impact sports and who are participating in boxing and things like that, and give them the some more compassion and understanding to the fact that, like, hey, like, this guy fell in love with this thing. It gave him incredible fame and maybe some money, but it also debilitated him for life. And what about the ones that didn't even make any money anyway, but it still debilitated them?
Yeah.
You know, the
Yeah.
the tragedy of that, and
Yeah.
and so I just hope to explore that realm in a way that shows the horrific nature of like CTE, but also calls out for like compassion and sort of dignity for the people that suffer from it,
Hmm.
and maybe we even try to raise money for CTE research. I don't know. Maybe something like that might be a nice thing to do with it. But
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, I mean, I think that you know, the book's gonna be pretty dark. So it's gonna give some people nightmares probably.
Okay. Thanks for the trigger warning. That's appreciated. Well, I already said it. Thank you for the trigger warning, but I do mean that. Thank you for those trigger warnings. This one does sound. I kind of thought that White Flight went to some dark places and was uncomfortable in a lot of ways to read for me as the reader. And this third one sounds like it's going to explore some even darker places. So, while I appreciate that conversation, especially about CTE, because that is something that there's not as much known about. There's more than we used to know about it, but there's still, I think, so much to learn about CTE and its implications. But this book sounds like that's going to take that conversation to many deeper levels than I am prepared for. I don't know, but I like the heads up that this is going to go to some dark places. So if you are a fan of these first two books in the series, that might be great, or you may want the heads up for the third book. We're going to take our final break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be talking more about Bill's process of writing and how he came to write for publication. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my conversation with author Bill Hillmann. Before the break, he was talking about the third book in this series of books around this family, and Joe talking about the dark places that it is going to go. So as I said, thank you for that heads up. But let's go ahead and finish this conversation with Bill. What made you want to write for publication, either fiction or nonfiction?
You know why? I'd never read until I was like 19 or 20 or so when I started got into fiction in a junior college. A guy named David McGrath at College of the Page kind of sparked a lot of interest in Hemingway in me, and when I realized that, like, I mean, in the Sun Also Rises, an Old Man in the Sea, more an Old Man in the Sea, actually. I didn't read the whole thing, but I read like big chunks of it. The thought that he could take a fisherman that's like a fist fighter, just an average working class guy, and make art that could win a Nobel Prize. That was really startling for me because every book I'd ever read was just like about like fancy people, and I never connected to any of that. Not that it's not good. I mean, that was like Shakespeare is great, but it's like about royals and stuff, not always, but a lot of it, right? And so I didn't really connect to it. But when I started reading The Old Man in the Sea, it really hit me. And then when I finally sat down and read The Sun Also Rises, and I thought I was really, connected to that, that soldier who's injured for life in a sexual way by war. That was really was captivating for me. And even though it's still kind of about rich, weird people,
Okay.
It's still that character for some reason, like I really connected to, and then the adventure and the chaos and then Spain, it got me really wanting to go to Spain. I read it in one sitting, which was like I could never read for more than like 20 minutes at a time, and I never read a book to the end. And I sat there for like 6 hours and read it cover to cover, and that was it. I changed my life, made me want to write. And I told myself, like, if I have any talent at all at this, I'm going to devote my life to it because I really love it. And so at my first competition I entered, I won a little prize, and that was it. That was the nudge I needed, and then I ended up meeting some really famous writers that were really good to me, like Irvin Welsh and Dante Gracia. They championed me left and right. They got me into grad school. I learned a lot at Columbia College, became really good at writing, and started getting published, and, my articles. And then, climbed the ladder of publications, big outlets, and ended up, you know, I had a globally syndicated article. You know, the novel started coming out, the memoir started coming out, and you know, I just fell in love with the path of that, and I love like you know that you know I think it's Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's really where I started to find like you know I love to examine life. You know, I love to examine it, and if that examination can help anyone in any way, wonderful. You know, and through publication, that's
Yeah.
great. You know, let's do it. You know, I and I just love waking up every morning with something to do. I love to wake up every morning and examine life.
Okay.
I love that, and the publications, it's great, you know. And if I can, if I can do that for the rest of my life, I'll have lived a life worth living, you know.
Yeah.
As Socrates said, hopefully if there's a heaven and afterlife, hopefully he's sitting there and he said, "You did pretty good. You examined your life pretty good." You know, I doubt it, but you know that I would hope to live up to that quote, and have a really meaningful life, um, that's worth living, and yeah, that's what it's all about for me.
Okay. Thank you. If people want to know more about you and the books, I know you have a website. So if you can give the website and any social media that you're active on.
It's Bill Hillmann with two N's at the end. .org is my website, and then I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I'm not really on Twitter, but I have a handle. But yeah, I mostly post on Facebook though, because they let me write a lot, and I love to just like write like long like stuff in there.
Okay. Okay. Um, Bill, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you wanted to make sure that you brought up during our time together?
Oh, I mean, just you know, I love Tortoise Books, my publisher. You know, Jerry is a wonderful guy. He has a wonderful publishing house. You know, he very takes a lot of care in the editing. Um, and I think he's another guy that lives you know, and he likes to examine life through editing and writing himself. He's got a bunch of books out too. And I'm just grateful that I have a path forward through Tortoise and through whatever other publishers I can get into or whatever. I just feel like without someone like Jerry around who really loves good books and does the work, you know, I don't know if I would be getting published like this, you know, and so I'm just grateful for guys like Jerry and other publishers like in that space, right? Because the New York houses, they're kind of closed off. Like
Mm-hmm.
unless you have like some gatekeeper like let you in,
Right.
then you're never gonna get in, you know, or maybe you get in maybe after 40 years of trying or something. But you know, I just think that like the small independent houses that publish good books and do the work and chug along and make it work, you know, they're a wonderful thing, and I'm grateful for them, and you know, I hope Jerry can continue doing it for the rest of his life, and I hope other, you know, independents that want to publish good fiction and they just pop up and stay strong, and we all work together and support each other because you know it's a beautiful thing. Um, Even though it's not New York Times bestsellers left and right, you know,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful journey to be on, and you know, you get things like I was just reviewed in the Chicago Tribune a few months back, and that's it's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing to be, you know, to be able to say like, hey, you know, I did something good enough for the Chicago Tribune to review me, and you know, I'm a real writer, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and it's like, you know, because maybe 0.001% of writers make money and can live off of it, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and the rest of us are just out here just trying to tell the truth and live our lives, you know, and people like Jerry make it possible.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for taking time. I know you've got a busy day, so thank you for taking time to talk to me about the book. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much. This was wonderful, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you once again to Bill for joining me to talk about White Flight. If you have read The Old Neighborhood, then you'll definitely want to pick this one up to continue the story of this family. In this case, we are following Joe, learning more about him, and then they are companions, so you do not have to read them in order, as Bill said, but if you want to start, the first one is The Old Neighborhood, the second one is White Flight, and then Bill is currently working on that third book, and it sounds like maybe that could be a standalone as well, but you might want to read the first two before. If you like books that are very unflinching in how they look at the world and characters and relationships within that world, Joe has some very complicated relationships, not only with his family, with his girlfriend, but with the world around him. He doesn't fit in a lot of ways. He does have so much potential. He's got he is incredibly smart. He is incredibly smart about physics. He is also really talented. He's a really talented boxer, but he's got some very rough edges. And this book is, if you're looking for a book that doesn't have language, this is not the book for you. If you're looking for a book that doesn't have violence, this is not the book for you. If you're okay with both of those things, this is a very complex story about a very complicated main character who is just trying his best, but not always making the best choices, and the world doesn't always allow him to make the best choices. But there is violence, and there's a lot of language. So I always try to let you know about those things, just so you don't go into it thinking one thing and then pick up a book that you're like, whoa, that was not what I was expecting. But if you listen to the conversation with Bill and you heard him talk about the third one and about the events of this one as well, I think you probably have a pretty good heads up. But like I said, this did not always go in the directions that I thought it was going to go. And I'm still sitting with it. I'm still kind of thinking about it, even after finishing it. It's sticking with me, and Joe is sticking with me. So, did I always love the story? Well, no, because Joe frustrated me a lot of times. But is the story sticking with me? Yes. So that says a lot right there. When a book sits with you afterwards, or you sit with that story and keep thinking, it's rolling around in my brain. I can't even quite dissect it here because it's still processing. But that says a lot about a book when it sticks with you like that. Sometimes books, I finish reading them and then poof, they're out of my brain. I've read thousands of books in my life, and I remember lots of them, and some of them not so much. This one is right now it's sticking, so we'll see. It's one that stays with you. So definitely check out this book, especially if you have read anything else by Bill. Thank you for joining me for this episode. I hope that you will join me for the next episode. We're going back into thriller territory. I will be speaking with author Courtney Sack about her book, The Hostess. And you can see right there on the cover, The Perfect Escape or The Perfect Nightmare. And we have got, like I said, we're back into thriller, psychological thriller territory. You'll have to tune in to the conversation to hear more about this book. But if you are a fan of thrillers, of psychological suspense, then definitely join me for the next conversation with author Courtney Sack. In the meantime, if you are a fan of this podcast, please do like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you're either listening to or watching the episode on. Really does help the podcast get out to more readers. That support is greatly appreciated. Leaving a positive review is another thing that you can do to help the podcast and get these episodes out. Helps the algorithm to give a positive review. So thank you if you have already done that. If you haven't, would you please consider leaving the podcast a positive review? I would be very, very grateful. You can follow the podcast on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. Love hearing from you. Please do come find the podcast and let me know all of those nosy things that I always want to know. What are you reading? Why are you reading it? What do you love? What are you going to read next? Inquiring podcast hosts want to know. I hope you're having a great week. If you are in more snow, I'm sorry, or maybe yay, but maybe, just maybe, that snow is giving you more time to read, and that is always my hope for you. I hope that whatever you're doing this week, you have plenty of time to get yourself lost in a great book. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you next time.